Hi everyone, this is Colleen, and today is Friday, July 8th, 2016, and this is Haggie Reads for You on Haggie Shack Radio, simulcast to Wolf Spirit Radio. And today I'm gonna pick up where I left off last week with Children of the Law of One, The Lost Teachings of Atlantis by John Peniel. Seclusion from temptations until willpower is forged. If you are on your spiritual path, but not living in a monastic situation, and you have not yet completed the metamorphosis to being a son of unselfish love, you will find that the temptations of the world are great. The more you try to develop self-discipline, the more the separate self rebels and fills you with temptations. The self hits you with urges and desires stronger than you've experienced before. As you just read about Ishkari, even having the right support structure was not enough for him. It is hard enough being in the proper environment to survive the urgings of the separate self, let alone doing it on your own. So being in an environment where everyone is doing the same things for discipline or development helps you get through these times while you are forging a willpower of steel. The other side of the coin is this. If you're living amongst regular, selfish people, those whose separate selves have full control, you don't just have your own temptations to deal with. You'll also find that the people around you, who are not on a path of unselfish love, will tend to hold you back. Our friends can both try and hold you back deliberately because they don't like what you're doing, and accidentally, just because they're part of your past behavior patterns, and you will tend to fall back into these patterns when around them. This takes place in many ways, physically, mentally, and spiritually. Have you ever noticed how many people take on certain traits of their close associates? There is an osmosis effect of influence. There's also a constant pressure to conform with your peers and not be different. And when your friends' selfish separate selves realize that you're trying to transcend your own separate self, their selves will do everything they can to try and hold you down. You are becoming a threat to them, or at least what they think they are. Other people's selfish separate selves would rather keep you in the hole you're in than have you get out of yours and start mucking things up for them. The witch burner syndrome. We've already covered that it is only right to judge others' path in order to determine your own. And I'm sure you understand that condemning others is wrong. But even if you've mastered that and you have a deep, true feeling of live and let live, you will not be seen that way if you're on the path of unselfish love. Others will judge and condemn your strange manner as being immoral, blasphemous, evil, a scourge on society, or whatever. Some may set out to hurt you in minor ways or major ways. Even if they don't look at you this way in the present, seeds of condemnation can grow in a very clever, twisted sort of way. Here's a warning given to me by Vishnu. When you try to hold to the truth, you found you just living your own beliefs quietly to yourself, even though you aren't hurting anyone, condemning others, or telling others how they should be. People will often still feel like you are condemning them. It is a natural reaction of their separate self. They may also twist things around and start thinking that you think that you are better than they are. Even if you're not condemning them, people may still become hostile as if you were, simply because you are living by your own truth that you have found. Because when you live truth, you shine, and truth is a threat to their separate selves. So their self will create an illusion, a smokescreen of feeling that you are judging and condemning them, when it's actually they who are condemning you. They do this at first as a defensive reaction, but later it can be used as a weapon. Michael added this: "The I Ching tells us that in times of darkness, the superior man hides his light, yet still shines. A neophyte, novice, doesn't really know when it's proper to hide his light and when he should let it shine unrestricted. Thus, a monastic environment offers protection until the neophyte is fully developed." Don't bring me down. Vishnu again spoke. Outside of your monastic environment, one way or another you will be a target for the negativity of others, including friends who don't see things the same way you do. Then there are those friends that may see things the way you do, but they're not willing to change. In either case, they will be negative toward you to some degree or another. They will bring pressure to bear. And unless you've transcended your separate self, their negativity will affect you. Unless you do something to stop it, it can fan the flames of negativity in you and spread back to them. Have you not seen arguments which start when one person is negative and the other person is not at first? Hostility is infectious. Getting infected with hostility lowers the consciousness. Zayn cut in. This is like the tuning fork effect we spoke of earlier. Just as inner being responds to inner being, the separate self responds at the same level of negative vibrations from another separate self. And if you've not transcended your own separate self, so as to be able to feel that in yourself without losing your balance, your inner composure, then you will end up being mad or upset yourself. Then you start sending out more negativity, physically, verbally, or psychically, or all three. And it builds. It grows. The same principle works in subtle ways, too. Being around lower conscious people holds your consciousness down, unless you have become a light. Have you ever noticed children or friends who, when they're alone, behave one way, but when they get around a certain person or a group, they behave differently? Yes, I have, but I've always ignored it or put it off to peer pressure, I said. True also. But what are the truths behind peer pressure? Ah, I said, so much more than meets the eye. Let go of your baggage until you're strong enough to carry it. During my first months at the monastery, once in a while I missed my old girlfriend, who I had left behind. I told her what I was doing and asked her to come with me, but she would have nothing to do with it. To her, it was bad enough when I went through more subtle changes in my younger years prior to going to the monastery. She got angry any time I moved even a hair closer to unselfish love. I can still hear her scream at me in anger in later years after my enlightenment. You love everybody. She said it like it was a degenerate crime. Why? Because her separate self had no possessive hold on mine. I knew our parting was for the best, though. If it weren't for the monastery and I hadn't succeeded in my suicide attempt, we'd probably still be seeing each other on and off, driving each other crazy, and we'd still be arguing all the time. We weren't good for each other, and the relationship did neither of us any good, but we still had strong attachments to each other. What a strange thing to have strong attachments to someone you can't get along with, and sometimes can't stand. I talked to Zayn about it one day when I was thinking about it, and feeling depressed. His words cut through clear as a bell. When a seeker has thus taken responsibility for their life, and accepted their responsibility to be one with and serve God, they must then recreate their life in a way that facilitates the change. A change from living from the separate self to going for the manifestation of the universal spirit. One element of this change is letting go. They must leave behind their old baggage, along with their past. They must leave behind and replace old selfish-oriented programming and ideas. And they must let go of attachments to people from their old selfish-oriented life, who have self-oriented behavior patterns with, and who thus impede their spiritual development. This is the same for friends or lovers. After one changes and is no longer subject to their own selfishness, then they can properly deal with such things, but only then. When we talk about letting go of an attachment to a person, it's not really the person we must let go of. We don't mean to say you must cut off ties with someone in order to let go of a selfish attachment, unless it is an abusive relationship, extremely detrimental, involves mutual negative dependence, or is like an out-of-control addiction. Although it may be far easier and quicker and better to just cut things off clean, but sometimes the easy path is not the best, and often such selfish attachments take care of themselves anyway, as do oil and vinegar. All that can be definitely said is that we must lose our selfish self's attachments. Unfortunately, the primary reason for the existence of many relationships is only based on feeding off of the attention each person's selfish separate self receives from the other. This creates mutual or one-sided possessiveness, which in turn breeds all kinds of negative emotions, depending on the changing tides of circumstances. This is especially true in intimate or romantic relationships. Also, hobbies, interests, or ideals were perhaps once held in common. But as people change, so do interests and ideals. And then there is also karma to take into consideration. This one you speak of may be a soulmate, but her consciousness is not on the level of yours, and she is not willing to grow. And your consciousness and inner strength are not on the level of being up to the task of helping her, for now at least. But sometimes when your path takes you in different directions, you should let go. You must let go. And even if you refuse to let go, sometimes fate gives you no choice. Always remember, though, those who truly belong together will never be parted forever, and often not for long. But in any case, you must free yourself from your attachments to those who have any measure of negative influence over you, or who impede your spiritual growth, your flowing with universal will, or your manifestation of God. Unselfish love, God's love, is impersonal. It loves everyone. It is the separate self that cuts off from this and prevents this. And one of the ways it does it is by developing separate self-oriented attachments. What do you mean that sometimes fate takes care of? The universal law of vibration automatically creates changes of associates when you change. Remember our discussion with Gabriel? Oil and vinegar are of different molecular vibrations, and they will each seek their own level, even if you mix them up. If a part of the oil changed to become vinegar, it would join the vinegar level and be surrounded by vinegar, and vice versa. As you change your level of consciousness, your vibration, to a higher one, you rise to a new level where new higher consciousness friends will be found. Those of the old vibration that do not change as you do may try to hold you down. But if they're unsuccessful, they generally just ultimately fall away and stay behind in their own choice of worlds, their own choice of consciousness, all of their own accord. To them, your changes make you weird, boring, and no fun. And to you, they also become uninteresting, shallow, and boring. When this happens, it may feel initially like a loss. But when you merge into your new higher level of consciousness and find those who belong with you on the same level, it feels wonderful. It is an incredible feeling to find your new higher companion, soulmates, or soul group family. But before you can change and find your new natural vibrational level, you must make those changes happen. Selfishness-oriented relationships are virtually the only kind of relationships non-enlightened beings have. The spiritual seeker needs to get free from the negative effects of such relationships. While selfishly based romantic relationships are a big problem, the more subtle relationships with friends and other relationships offer problems and challenges also. Like what? The spiritual seeker, who wants to change as rapidly as possible, should stop wasting time. And if part of that wasting of time is hanging out with people or friends whose direction in life is self-centered, rather than universal or spiritual, regardless of how nice or harmless this seems to be, then you are slowing yourself down, or even maybe condemning yourself. People have established patterns of behavior in their relationships based on complex interactions between the selfish separate selves who are involved. For the seeker, these behavior patterns are negative side trips off their main spiritual path. I'm not sure what you mean exactly. Could you be more specific? You know what I mean. Diversions, selfish highs, making small talk, playing or watching games, pursuing mutually selfish interests, doing business, whatever. The behavior patterns of those who are in such self-oriented relationships are selfish, separate, self-supportive, and thus negative. And the patterns can't be changed until a student is totally free from his own selfish, separate self. That's one reason there have always been monasteries and convents, so people can focus only on their growth without any diversions or temptations, even offering themselves until they have either achieved their goal or become strong enough to be uninfluenceable. So you mean avoid things you have in common or do in common that are fruitless? Not just doing things that are fruitless. An entire association can be harmful, like an addiction or criminals. There are many subtle, seemingly harmless behaviors that can negatively affect you. Whether it just takes a moment away from your growth, which could be that one extra moment you needed to achieve enlightenment before you die, or it takes a moment away from something vital that you might eventually be doing to help others once you are serving God, or something that actually is directly harmful. A former criminal who really wants to go straight should no longer associate with former friends who are still criminals, because they're likely to commit crimes again. True? Yes. A drug addict who really wants to kick the habit should not associate with drug addict friends, or he is likely to use drugs again. True? Yes. The selfish separate self is similarly affected by other selfish separate selves. Thus the true seeker of spiritual change, who really wants to change, must treat his separate self-addiction just as seriously. And if they want to be more sure of staying on the wagon, they need to keep away from both the drugs that feed the addiction and from those who are addicts. Like I said, that doesn't necessarily mean never seeing or talking to your old associates again. But it's obvious that you do need to focus on freeing yourself from your own selfish separate self. Kick the habit totally and become immune to the negative effects of being around other selfish separate selves. Otherwise, you will never be truly good for the person in that relationship, and they will never be good for you. That is one of the functions of the monasteries, but it could also be fulfilled by one or more friends who are on the same path, or at least going in a similar direction as you. Things will be changing in the future, and you'll have to find new ways to accomplish helping people with this sort of thing, without our monastery, or possibly any monastery. What? It is not time. Let me go on. Just remember this. Whether you have a traditional monastery or not, it is vital for the serious spiritual seeker and student who wishes to grow as fast as possible to find associates who are not part of their selfish attachments or selfish addictive past. Instead, they should surround themselves or primarily associate with people who have a similar spiritual orientation and whose company is spiritually supportive. This is very important because, again, at this early stage of beginning to change, the outside influences of one's associates have a great effect. Thus, people need monasteries and spiritual communities, or at least friends and associates on the same path. I'll scratch your separate self if you'll scratch mine. But leaving people behind, what of those who need you, who you could have helped if you stayed with them, or at least stayed in touch? I have regrets over this. My old friends are hurt. My family hates me for abandoning my mother while she was so sick. Does she have no one to care for her? No, she does. We weren't really associating anyway because she didn't like my girlfriend, and she told me to get rid of my girlfriend or get out of the house when I was 16 years old. And she has her brothers and sisters that take care of her. What's wrong with her? Something called shingles. It's like little sores along the spine, and the doctor said it is emotionally stimulated. Ah, and why did she get sick? I think it was to keep me there. She has a powerful mind. But there was also one of my friends. He was so close he almost came with me here. Yet he's not here. Why? His girlfriend got pregnant and convinced him to stay. Proving my point, it seems. But what if I could have helped him still? First, listen to me now. This is vital for you to understand and remember. Until you transcend your separate self, even if you're not being negatively affected by those around you, you will not be of any real aid to them or anyone. Because with your separate self in control, your thoughts, words, and actions will tend to feed and feed off of the separate self of others, as your separate self strives to survive. Your only real chance to help your mother or your friends is to change yourself first. Secondly, you have so many to help. You must care as much about a stranger as much as your closest friend. Why is a stranger any less important than your friends or relatives, or your drinking buddies, fishing buddies, bridge club, or whomever? We are all identical children of the one God, all just as important as any other. The beggar in the street is important as the king of the world. If you don't feel that way, you don't have unselfish love or universal consciousness, and you are useless to anyone. All beings are part of the one, all the same underneath. All children of the one God. And you have many who will help. If you stayed behind, what help would have you been to anyone? Including your mother or friends, honestly. You may just be able to help your mother and your friends after you truly love them. But that will also be up to them. You're still just selfish and uncaring yourself. So how much help can you be now? None. Thank you. It is much clearer now. So the teachings advise those who seek oneness with the universal spirit to place themselves in a monastic community where they can nurture and develop in spirit. It doesn't need to be big. You can even do it with a couple of like-minded friends or relatives, as long as everyone understands the rules of interaction, giving and living with each other. It would also be good to have a teacher in such a situation, but even without one, there definitely needs to be a head for the body that everyone agrees will have final say-so, and has a good amount of respect for, at least initially. The teacher doesn't necessarily need to be living with you, although that is the most desirable. But you must have a teacher that everyone agrees has greater insight than their own, and has the respect to give direction and input to all members, and to decide any disagreements if, when, they crop up. The most important thing is that each member approach each other member with total humility rather than defensiveness. One of the biggest problems the self creates to defeat growth is the ego trait of wanting to be right all the time, or at least having the appearance of being right. A person who is set on appearing right all the time actually creates a pattern in which they're usually wrong most of the time. And worse, they don't even learn from their own mistakes. But a person who doesn't care how they appear to others and has a humble attitude will eventually be right all the time. A musician who's afraid to hit wrong notes when they're learning or playing will learn far slower and be a much poorer player than the one who takes the risk and goes for it, and doesn't care if he looks foolish just because he hit a wrong note once in a while. That one will be the fastest learner, and ultimately the greatest artist. Be humble, and you will grow. Be the lowest, and you will be the highest. Give only to the spirit in others. From Vishnu. Through practicing giving within your circle of like-minded people, you will eventually know well the difference between giving to the separate self and giving to the whole being and inner being. Eventually you will be able to give to the entire world, even to those who would selfishly take, for you will be giving what they need for their spiritual development rather than nurturing their separate selves. One hand washes the other. From Michael. The ideal state of things is for everyone to be giving all the time. This is the state of paradise. In an ideal material world, this would include material things. On the material plane, which indeed is part of the whole and should reflect universal harmony, everyone has different talents and skills. And if all give, all needs will be filled. For example, a seamstress makes clothes, a shoemaker makes shoes, a carpenter carps, etc. In a world where everyone is giving, taking care of each other, it would work very simply. If the seamstress needs shoes, she gets them. If the shoemaker needs a house, it's built. If the carpenter needs clothes, they're made. No bargaining a trade, no buying or selling, just giving, just unselfish love. This is the idea behind brotherly love and communism. But communism doesn't work well for the ordinary people of the world. Do you know why? The same reason nothing works well. Selfishness. And with selfishness mixed with communism, it can be worse. When you take away the greed factor in making a living, and put things on a level that all things are shared, people start putting out less effort. They do this for a couple of reasons. They know they will get taken care of regardless of how much they contribute. They know that regardless of how much they contribute, they won't get any more than a share in everyone's prosperity. How sad. Done properly by unselfishly loving beings, such a thing would increase the wealth, beauty, and creativity of an entire society beyond anything that's been known. What else is our monastery but this? But the selfish separate self will always prevent that as long as it's in control. And, as we have seen by the communist governments that were controlled by selfish separate selves, they would cheat and destroy it all anyway. The only reason it can work in a monastery is because we can control it here so much better, so much more easily. And the main concern or direction here is to become selfless and giving, not just to share everything equally and selfishly. Unfortunately, until the whole world can live together in unselfish love, we have the mini-world, the mini-society, the spiritual community, where those who desire to can open up and give of themselves. In a monastery community such as that, everyone is either already unselfishly loving or working towards achieving that. And such joining of forces makes for a much greater force. Of course, even in our own monastery we must stay vigilant, and occasionally must rout out and chastise the lazy, who are selfishly taking advantage of our brotherly love. But overall, it is the greatest way of living. This quote from the I Ching is a favorite of mine regarding the essence of the spiritual community or monastery. What is required is that we unite with others, in order that all may complement and aid one another through holding together. But such holding together calls for a central figure around whom other persons may unite. If a man has recognized the necessity for union and does not feel strong enough to function as the center, it is his duty to become a member of some other organic fellowship. There have been many sorts of alternative communities formed over the years. Communities with a strong spiritual foundation and leadership are the ones that stand the test of time. Those that don't have strong spiritual leadership usually disintegrate, entirely or partially, with the members withdrawing from each other into their separate spaces, holding bitter feelings. There will eventually come a time when everyone will be unselfishly loving and one with the universal one. Then there will be no need for leaders or teachers, and government will come from within. But in a spiritual community, at this stage of conscious evolution, there is a definite need for leadership. First, that problem of selfish people not carrying their own weight can affect and infect a monastery also. There needs to be a clear-sighted, well-respected leader in order to avoid leeches, corruption, and to ride the stragglers. For a community, having a good leader is like having a good head on your shoulders. Leadership is necessary for coordination of the members' activities, something like the way the mind coordinates the various functions of the members of a physical body. Finally, an unselfishly loving leader or teacher can function as a means of response and attunement to the universal consciousness, God, through the application of devoted, unselfish love, the practice of bhakti yoga. This is a method by which the love the student has for the teacher tunes the student into the teacher's universal consciousness, and thus raises the student's own consciousness. Besides the functions and purposes of the spiritual community we have thus far mentioned, there is also the advantage of the concentrated, combined power you have when people unite. Great things can be accomplished when we work as one. Alone, we can accomplish little compared to that which we can do together. Whenever two or more are gathered together in His name. The new monasticism, fellowship in the New World. As I started out saying in the beginning of this chapter, times change. Our monastery in Tibet is destroyed, and many teachers, students, and householders have been murdered. We need new monasteries. But in these times there is the danger that any small, true spiritual movement in which people live together in a monastic fashion will simply be called a cult, demonized, attacked, and destroyed, Such labeling and harassment can even happen just because it doesn't fit in with whatever is more closely monitored norm of behavior. So regarding new monasteries, it cannot be just as it was, perhaps in the future, after the great changes, but not now. On a side note, fortunately, the great changes are coming. The prophecies, including the desecration of the land of the teachers, have come to pass, and more prophecies are still being fulfilled. Just today, I saw the destruction of the Church of Assisi where St. Francis was buried. It was devastated by an earthquake. It was a sign, a fulfillment of prophecy. Also, as I write, a cloud of smoke half the size of the United States is choking people around Asia. And the incredible fires that are causing it were started by humans destroying more fertile soil, and humans changing the atmosphere of the earth itself, El Niño phenomenon, dying reefs, giant holes of ozone depletion, overfishing of the oceans, you name it, and there it is. As humankind's stupidity brings nature's reactions, we are accelerating towards change. More volcanoes are activating and erupting. People everywhere are dying of drought, flooding, and new diseases. Famine and economic collapse are around the corner. Many people don't see it and don't want to believe these things are coming. They're in denial because they're afraid. It's quite natural, because the scenario can be quite frightening. But seeing what it's really going on and what's coming is just a matter of opening your eyes and looking at it all without fear. It helps if you see it as a healing crisis rather than just a horrible, meaningless destruction. Back to the new monasticism. For some of you, this book is just somewhat interesting or somewhat boring reading. For others, it is just what you'd hoped for, and you'll want more. For you, our order is still here, but the outer form has been forcibly changed, and a new one is being born. Some of our ways of life of the past are gone. Time is short, and we must adapt, or cease to survive entirely. Thus, we must use the tools of these times to our own ends as much as possible. The future will see the building of new monasteries, centers or communities. Perhaps benefactors will come forward to help, but in any case, we will find the means if it is in the will of the universal spirit. But as long as one of us is still alive, we will always carry on our work, with or without our primary monastery. There are still teachers around the world for those who want, need, and are ready for one. And advances in technology are also affording new ways of reaching and helping large numbers of people in many different ways. The vibrational sounds can accurately be reproduced and made available to the masses due to the advent of audio CDs. We now have websites that allow people to read free chapters of this book, learn meditations online, get books, vibrational sounds, yoga videos, music, and other tools for consciousness raising. It also serves a dual purpose, because the funds coming from it in mail order help support our endeavors in monks, which in turn helps us help others. If we are able, we also envision creating a unique spiritual resort where people can come and spend time in a secluded, beautiful, natural setting and spiritual environment. Guests would have many options. They could just relax and enjoy the beauty of pristine nature, take walks along meditation paths, participate in group meditations and discussions, lectures, be alone with themselves, and meditate at high-energy vortexes, or learn new meditation, yoga, or interpersonal golden rule transformational techniques. The Internet and telecommunications has also afforded new means for spiritual interaction. If you want to network or contact a teacher, elder, or novice, you can still use mail, of course, but now you can also do it via email. See in the book. The company who handles our mail orders can also set appointments for an elder monk to call you if you really need to speak with one. We can even help those of you who wish to network with each other or form study groups to get in contact with each other. Anywhere in the world you can now stay in touch with each other and even work together. What a strange, horrible, wonderful time. Note: we have been swamped with letters, emails, and people requesting calls. Unfortunately, we just don't have enough time and people to keep up with the volume. So if you write or email, please keep in mind that we may not be able to get back with you for weeks, months, or even at all. If you have a very important message, you could leave a message with the mail order company that handles our products. The number is in the back of the book. Chapter 16. Visualization and Affirmations. Visualization and affirmations are two languages or tools that you can use to communicate to your subconscious and alter your programming. As we have covered already, the subconscious mind, being very much like a computer, needs to have a program to run. The programming there determines most of the mental and physical aspects of your being. The programming has had no conscious programmer. It has been programmed from birth by a flood of external influences, mostly negative. It is the programming of the biocomputer of yourself, a separate entity in a world full of separate entities, who are all looking out for number one, always seeking self-substantiation. During my time as a novice, I didn't really understand the seriousness of this. I asked Zayn, why is it so emphasized here and in the ancient teachings from Atlantis that we must think of our thoughts as programming, pay so much attention to them and devote so much of our time to it? Oh, I forget. Sarcasm. It is simple, obvious. Just think that that's what makes everything just thinking. Remember, action follows thought. The physical is the result of mental activities. The mind is the builder. Everything is the result of mere thoughts. Thus it is vital to be able to communicate with and alter the programming that affects the mind. It all begins and ends there. That's why it's so important, and why it's taught that so much attention must be given to it. Remember, too, that for you to be in proper place in the order of things and experience peace and oneness with the universe, the mind should be used as a tool for the manifestation of the universal forces in the physical plane. But you have free will, and can choose to disregard the universal spirit. So what will you have your programming build in your life and the lives of others? If you realize the importance of this, and decide to take control of your programming and thoughts, There are specific tools that can help you to do so. Go read this now, and we'll speak more of it afterwards. Make it real in your mind, and your mind will make it so. Relive actions in the realms of the mind, making it right to repeat it not. Always speak to your mind in a manner that shows it what you desire to achieve as a positive outcome. In speaking to your mind, never fight the negative with itself. In a direct struggle, good will lose to evil. Make strong in the good, and evil will be gone. Be ever vigilant in tending to your mind. Turn from your negative thoughts. Use your free will. Dwell only on positive thoughts, and success is assured. Use not powers of the mind, but for developing virtue, and to serve universal will. Affirmations. Affirmations are positive statements or directions you make to yourself in order to bring about changes in subconscious behavior patterns to whatever you will them to be. Even before I had a chance to talk to Zayn after reading the text, he told me to look up, I ran into Mikhail, who just out of the blue had this to say to me. Using an affirmation is like planting a seed in the fertile soil of your subconscious mind. And like a seed, it needs daily tending or it will die. For this reason, affirmations are tools that are used daily and frequently by those who wish to change. It would be best if you received your individual affirmations from your personal true teacher, for he would best know what you should be working on for your particular situation. If it's not possible for you to get your affirmations from your true teacher because you have none or have not found one yet, you could ask God for guidance, for affirmations during meditation, or just think about negative, selfish traits you have that you know you need to change, or positive traits you would like to acquire. Later, I met with Zayn and asked him more about the subject. Father, what's the best way to use affirmations to change? For those who really desire to change as quickly as possible, a positive affirmation should be done instantly. Every time someone brings up to you an improvement you should make for yourself or points out a fault, this should be done instantly and sincerely, with thought, right when it's brought up to you. But what if the person bringing something up to you is wrong? Until you are enlightened, if you look sincerely and hard enough at yourself, you will usually find some fault of your own at work in any argument. Regardless of whether the origin of the argument was your fault or what the issue of the argument was about, or whether or not the claimed issue was your fault. For instance, you might be in an argument in which someone else is totally wrong, but you became negative and stopped unselfishly loving. If you've realized enough that you're finally understanding that there is absolutely no reason good enough to stop loving unselfishly, then you should do an affirmation something like this, regardless of what the argument was about, or what the outcome of it was. I am always unselfishly loving. But for it to help, you need to really feel that and mean that when you say it, just not mouth it, or it'll be an ineffective tool. Consider this also. Affirmations need to be effective, must always be stated as a positive result, rather than trying to negate a negative. For instance, in the above example of an argument, the affirmation was not and should not be, I am not negative, I do not get angry, or such. It needs to be phrased in the positive way, something like, I am positive, humble, and unselfishly loving. Do you see the difference? In other words, you always say the good thing that you want to achieve and never use a double negative, never even give energy to the negative trait that you wish to change, lest you actually feed the negative. Instead, you give energy to the positive trait that will supersede the negative. Alrighty, I'm going to stop here and put on some music and take a little break, and I'll see you on the other side.